should consider in 1948 the approval of a new Declaration of Human Rights for free men in a free world. Not only is it appropriate that we should here reaffirm our respect for the human rights and fundamental freedoms, but that we should renew our determination to develop and protect those rights and freedoms. Freedom of thought, conscience and religion, freedom of opinion and expression, freedom from arbitrary arrest and detention, the right of a people to choose their own government, to take part in its work, and if they become dissatisfied with it, to change it. The obligation of government to act through law. These are some of the elements that combine to give dignity and worth to the individual. The Charter of the United Nations reflects these concepts and expressly provides for the promotion and protection of the rights of man as well as for the rights of nations. This is no accident, for in the modern world the association of free men within a free state is based upon the obligation of citizens to respect the rights of their fellow citizens. And the association of free nations in a free world is based upon the obligation of all states to respect the rights of other nations. Systematic and deliberate denials of basic human rights lie at the root of most of our troubles and threaten the work of the United Nations. Will be those states which are genuinely dedicated to the preservation of the dignity and integrity of the individual. Let this third regular session of the General Assembly approve by an overwhelming majority the Declaration of Human Rights as a standard of conduct for all. And let us, as members of the United Nations, conscious of our own shortcomings and imperfections, join our effort in good faith to live up to this high standard. Our aspirations must take into account men's practical needs, improved living and working conditions, better health, economic and social advancement for all, and the social responsibilities which these entail. Through the United Nations, we are seeking to combine our efforts to promote international trade, to solve the difficulties of foreign exchange, to facilitate the voluntary migration of peoples, and to increase the flow of information and ideas across national boundaries. The International Trade Organization Charter would establish procedures for expanded multilateral trade with the goal of raising living standards and maintaining full employment. A year ago, I expressed the view to the General Assembly that a supreme effort is required from us all if we are to succeed in breaking through the vicious circles of deepening political and economic crisis. I believe that most of us in this organization have sought to make such an effort, but that this is beginning to bring results. Despite the cooperative action of most nations to rebuild peace and well-being, tension during the past year has increased. The leaders of other nations are creating a deep rift between their countries and the rest of the world community. We must not allow that rift to widen any further, and we must redouble our efforts to find a common ground. Let us go back to the Charter, to words that were solemnly written by the peoples of the United Nations while the tragedy of war was vividly stamped on their minds. We, the people of the United Nations, says the Charter, are determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. For these ends, to practice tolerance and to live together in peace with one another as good neighbors. 3 years later, we are confronted with the need to save not only succeeding generations, but our own. The first purpose of the United Nations is to maintain international peace and security. And to that end, all members are pledged to settle their international disputes by peaceful means and in conformity with the principles of justice and international law. As part, the United States is prepared to seek in every possible way, in any appropriate forum, a constructive and peaceful settlement of the political controversies which contribute to the present tension and uncertainty. I do not wish to deal at this time with the details of any particular issue, but there are broad lines along which a just and equitable settlement of each of these questions might be reached. Some of these matters are on the agenda of the United Nations. Others, such as those dealing with the peace settlements, are to be dealt with in other forums. Nevertheless, whatever the forum, as members of the United Nations, we are all subject to the principles of the Charter. In Austria, our aim is the restoration of its political and economic freedom within its 1937 frontiers and its immediate admission as a member of the United Nations. Other questions affecting world peace are now before the United Nations, some of them before this Assembly. We believe that the ends to be sought on these matters may be briefly summarized as follows. A Palestine free from strife and the threat of strife, with both the Jews and Arabs assured the peaceful development envisaged by the actions of the General Assembly and the Security Council. An early demobilization of armed forces to permit the return to conditions of peace and normal living in Palestine. The repatriation of the refugees who wish to return and live in peace with their neighbors. Economic aid to Jews and Arabs to restore and strengthen their economic well-being. The admission of Transjordan and Israel to membership in the United Nations. Providing for the elimination of atomic weapons from national armaments. For the development of atomic energy for peaceful purposes only. And for safeguards to ensure compliance by all nations with the necessary international measures of control. Under adequate and dependable guarantee against violation, a progressive reduction in armaments as rapidly as the restoration of political confidence permits. Other situations or problems might be mentioned, but if constructive steps are taken toward the settlement of those which have been indicated, new hope would arise among men and new confidence among the nations of the world. It will be readily seen that the above pattern is toward peace. No governments or peoples who work toward such ends can be held to be seeking war or imperialistic expansion or disorder and strife. We have noted with particular interest the report of the Secretary General on the work of the United Nations relating to the millions of people who are not yet fully self-governing. We are mindful of the obligations undertaken in the Charter for the political, economic, and social development of these peoples. There are a number of fully qualified states now awaiting admission whose election has been supported by the United States but has been blocked for reasons not consistent with the Charter. The most recent applicant, Ceylon, one of the new states to emerge in Southern Asia, has been denied the membership to which it properly aspired. The report of the Interim Committee on the problem of voting in the Security Council represents the first comprehensive study of this vital problem since San Francisco and contains the views of an overwhelming majority of the members. The work of the Security Council would be greatly facilitated if the recommendations of the Interim Committee could be accepted by the members of the Council. The Interim Committee itself has worked usefully and effectively during the past year and can continue to render an important service to the General Assembly. Their service has been rendered under conditions of great hardship and personal danger. We have been given a particularly solemn reminder of these conditions by the tragic death of Count Foch Bernadotte and Colonel Serrault at the hands of assassins. The people of the United States join in tribute to the man who worked brilliantly and courageously as the United Nations mediator in Palestine. We pay tribute also to those others who have lost their lives in the service of peace. We believe that the Assembly should give sympathetic consideration to the suggestions of the Secretary General for the establishment of a small United Nations Guard Force to assist United Nations missions engaged in the Pacific settlement of disputes. The fate of the mediator in Palestine and the experience of the several commissions already working in the field has already demonstrated the need for such a group.